Hello and welcome to the beginning of my initiative. This is part 1 of the series where I will show you what you can do with the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. That's right, we're going to revisit the Pi 3B Plus for 2026. I will talk about the specs of the board again, and I will show you the Pi running in real time, and we will talk about some of the things you can do with the Pi 3B Plus and some of the limitations of the board. So, let's get started. Alright guys, so here is my Pi 3B Plus again. As you can see here, under the heatsink is the Broadcom BCM2837B0, which has 4 ARM Cortex-A53 cores running up to 1.4 GHz, and it also has the Video Core 4 GPU. It's the same one you've probably seen many times. Under this, it's the USB to Ethernet adapter for the gigabit Ethernet. So on the bottom, we have the RAM under the heatsink along with the SD card. We have the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip, micro USB for power as usual, HDMI, camera connector, sort of gigabit Ethernet, but not really, 4 USB 2 ports, a GPIO header, and of course the display connector. So that's really it for the specifications of the Pi 3B Plus. So that's it. Alright guys, so let's start with some tests. So I have the Pi 3 running on this terminal, and we're going to run a CPU test first, just to give you an idea of what CPU performance is like for the Pi 3B Plus in 2026. And by the way, I am running Raspberry Pi OS Trixie 64-bit Lite, since that's what this can run. So I have this already set up to go. So basically it's Sysbench, where we factor numbers up to 20,000, specifically prime numbers. The threads are 4, and then we run. So let's run it now. Alright, let's see what we get. Final results. Alright, so we get about 10.0025 seconds. And this compares to my PC here, which is at 10.0032 seconds. So just on raw CPU power, that's really impressive. But again, that's just Sysbench, and I will be running a more rigorous test, specifically a cooling test later on. Now let's run a Wi-Fi test, or specifically we're going to use speed test. And yes, as you can see here, we're going to go to the way I already downloaded speed test here, so we're going to run it. So this is for 64-bit ARM, and we'll see how it is. Let me increase it a little bit so you guys can see it. I know it looks weird, but yes, I know I kind of messed up here, but this is what you really should be paying attention to. So we'll wait for it. Alright, so the results here, we get 96.22 megabits per second. Now, I actually tested it closer to my router, and I was getting about 100 megabits per second, but this is still pretty good. And remember, the speed of Wi-Fi depends on how far you are from it. So I'm a bit further from the router, but it's pretty good. And this is, by the way, this is for Pi 3B Plus. Upload speeds are pretty consistent because that's what I got when I tested this before, so that's not bad. So overall, this is still good for wireless performance if you want to use this wirelessly, and this is also good if you want, and the CPU performance is still pretty good if you want to build a low-end cluster, and also it's really good for low-end emulation. But let's move on to cooling tests. Alright folks, so we're going to do a series of tests, and specifically cooling. Now, in a previous segment, you saw my Pi 3B Plus, which only has the single heatsink. So I'm going to show you a script that I wrote here. So this is called CPU test by .sh. All this does is it shows the CPU the base temperature using VCGen CMD. It measures the temperature. It runs sysbench, and then it runs sysbench here for 30 seconds. Then of course it shows the temperature after. So that's all we need to do. So I'll exit out of here. So we're going to run the test now. So let's run it here. So as you can see, this is currently running at 35.4 degrees Celsius. This is, by the way, idle temperature. So we'll wait for 30 seconds. And in the meanwhile, I will tell you that this test shows what the Pi will do under load. So as soon as the 30 seconds tests are over, I will basically show you what the effect is of just having a simple heatsink. And there you go. So it's at now 45.1 degrees Celsius. So if I put my finger over it, yeah, it's really hot. So that's it for this test. But in the next one, I'm going to add a small heatsink. So I will be back for that. Alright folks, now we're back with the next test, and I apologize, I meant to say fan, not heatsink. So I added a small fan to the Pi, and now let's check the temperature here. So it's at 34.9 degrees, so now it's a bit cooler. So now we can run the same test. So I let it idle for a little bit, so I will make sure. So let's run the test again. Well, the temperature test. So yeah, okay, so we are at normal temperature now, so let's run that test again. Okay, so now it's at 34.3 degrees Celsius. So what's going to happen next is we are going to run the same test using the same amount of threads. So once 30 seconds are over, we're going to see how well it did compared with the heatsink only. So we'll see how well it does. And yes, I picked 30 seconds. And okay, so it's at 42.9 degrees Celsius. And last time it was 45.1 degrees Celsius. So there is a noticeable change in temperature. Now I did run this temperature test before, so if we go to documents, I'll show you what I mean. Yes, I have a bunch of things here, so let me find it here. Here it is. So I actually ran this test before. So as you can see, without the fan, the idle temperature is a bit higher, of course. So we can see that adding a small fan does actually improve it. And this is perfect because if you're playing, let's say, emulated games, adding a fan would actually improve CPU performance and cooling. Now I'd recommend getting a much bigger fan than the one I was using, which is a 30mm fan. And you can use something like an ice tower cooler to really improve cooling. So if you used an ice tower cooler, you would see these temperatures fall at least 10 degrees more than this, and that would actually be better. So just using a small fan does help. Now this is only, of course, if you plan to run CPU intensive tasks. Now if you are going to run this as a cluster, then of course you'd be getting a PoE hat, which does have a fan, so that point is moot. But if you do plan to not use a heatsink, then it'll still run, but at some point it will get very toasty. So adding a fan does help a bit in that case. So if you're not running CPU intensive tasks, I'd still recommend using a fan for the Pi 3B Plus. Alright folks, so that's it for all the Pi tests. Alright folks, before we end this video, I want to show you this article that I wrote on Medium, which I'll link in the description. And specifically, I did run these performance tests. Now, I ran these tests using Bookworm and Trixie, and yes, the results speak for themselves. So I wouldn't say they're great results, but they are consistent. For example, with Wi-Fi, we got some surprising results, and even Wi-Fi uploads surprised me a bit. The CPU tests were pretty good too, I would say, even though they weren't as much of an improvement as I thought it would be, but it's what you expect. And yes, I did test it against my other PC, and yeah, my Celeron G3930 is actually on par with the 3B Plus, which is insane. So I will link this article in the description, and that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.